T under attack. They were being hunted. The engines roared to life, lifting the vessel into the air, just as beams lit up the hillside below. Zelia cradled Lyra close, whispering old Zalari lullabies, tears in her eyes. Elia sent out a coded message to Earth Command. This is Voss. Princess Zelia and I are alive. We have a hybrid child. The Zalari Empire has declared war. They're coming. Protect the child at all costs. The signal burst through the dark space, picked up by outposts and relays, spreading like a wildfire. On Earth, generals and leaders stared in shock. A war over a child, but not just any child, one that could unite two species or tear apart the stars. Back in orbit, as their ship left the moon's gravity, Elias turned to Zelia. We need to disappear. No friends, no allies, only shadows. Zelia nodded to me. One, and we protect our daughter, even if the galaxy turns against us. Behind them, Celathon burned in small fires. Above them, the first wave of Zalari warships crossed into human space, and in the arms of her parents, Lyra slept unaware that her birth had just started a war that could change everything. Above the glowing curve of Earth, alarms blared through the orbital command station as Zalari warships tore through, folded space, and emerged like shadows from a nightmare, their sleek obsidian hulls catching the sun as they launched a sudden and brutal attack on the outer colonies. Within minutes, communication stations on Europa went silent. The science base on Ganymede was turned to rubble, and defense drones vanished in brilliant flashes of white heat, leaving Earth scrambling to respond, while families on distant moons cried for help that would come too late. Back on a stolen diplomatic cruiser, hidden inside a storm cloud on the edge of Saturn's rings, Commander Elias Voss watched the battle reports pour in, jaw tight and eyes colder than ice, holding his infant daughter close while Princess Zelia worked furiously at the controls, trying to reroute their ship through safe zones that no longer existed. Cause the war was no longer a distant threat was here, roaring like fire through every system once protected by fragile treaties. The betrayal of peace shocked the human command, but not Elias. Had known King Zoroff's pride, and he had felt the hatred behind his eyes the day they met, long ago, when talks of unity were still alive. And now, that hatred had turned to action, aimed at the innocent child born of two worlds, a child who cooed softly in his arms, unaware that her very blood had triggered a storm. Earth Command had received Elias's message, and a full recall was ordered. But many allies were already backing away, fearful of Zalari. Rage and supplies were growing thin while trust was vanishing like dust in space. Elias knew they could not stay hidden for long, and every hour brought the war closer, till, at last, they were found again, this time by a bounty ship, not Zalari, but hired by them, with armor patched together from stolen tech and weapons glowing with deadly promise. Its captain demanding the child with a sneer and a lie about mercy. Elias didn't believe him for a second and opened fire before the last syllable left the bounty hunter's mouth, sending the smaller ship spinning off into the black. But their location was exposed, and that meant more were coming. Desperate, Elias reached out to an old contact, not a friend, but a former AI war construct, decommissioned and hidden after the last galactic Warhammer 17. A machine that once wiped out entire fleets, but now lived quietly in the ruins of a dead station near Titan, buried beneath years of dust and regret. When Elias and Zelia landed, the station's lights flickered to life, and Mara's voice greeted them coldly, asking why she should help the man who once tried to shut her down. But the answer came not from Elias, but from Lyra, who reached out from her mother's arms and placed a tiny hand on the wall, sending a soft wave of light through the circuitry. And for the first time in decades, Mara hesitated, not from fear, but from curiosity. as if the child had touched something forgotten inside her metal heart. Mara agreed to shield them, but warned that the protection would not last. For the Zalari would never stop until the child was dead or captured, and even then, they might burn half the galaxy just to erase the shame of her birth. As they rested inside the silent station, Elias recorded a new message, his voice quiet but strong, sending it through hidden channels. They call us monsters for loving each other, for creating life instead of war, but we will not run forever, and we will not hide forever. Humanity stands for choice, and we choose to fight, not for power, but for her future. The message spread across human space, picked up by old satellites and rebel news feeds, reaching not just humans, but even some Zalari citizens who had grown tired of endless war, their minds shaken by the idea of a child who belonged to both sides, a child who could speak to both hearts. Meanwhile, the bounty on Lyra doubled, then tripled, and strange ships began circling old jump routes, hunting for the stolen cruiser like wolves in the dark. While rumors spread about her strange powers, whispers of a voice that echoed in the minds of those nearby, calming anger and slowing violence, a gift no one understood but all feared. Back in the station, Zelia confessed something to Elias that chilled him. Lyra might be a thought singer, a rare and ancient trait once revered in Zalari culture, capable of bonding minds, sharing feelings, and guiding fleets without a word. But such beings had vanished long ago, and if Zorath discovered the truth, he would not stop at killing her. He would use her, twist her power into a weapon that could crush entire civilizations. Elias swore to never let that happen, and together, with Mara's help, they began building a plan, not just to survive, but to find a place where Lyra could grow in peace, far from kings, armies, and fear. But even as they plotted, a dark signal echoed through Space King Zora's voice, cold and full of pride, declaring to the galaxy that humanity had committed an unthinkable crime, that a child born of impurity now threatened the balance of power, and that any who aided her would face total annihilation. Ships began to fall silent. Allies turned off their beacons, and the stars grew colder. But in the shadows, something else stirred ordinary people, both human and Zalari, who saw hope in a child untouched by hate, and they began to whisper her name like a secret flame, Lyra, the bridge between stars. The girl who might change everything. The skies above Mars burned red as fleets gathered near the defense perimeter, warships lining up like silent giants waiting for battle, while inside the command ship, Valor's Edge, Admiral Rika Tanaka studied the growing map of Zalari movements, her fingers tightening behind her back as she approved Operation Homefire, risky strategy built around one goal: protect the hybrid child Lyra at any cost, and strike the Zalari where it would hurt the most, in their communication hubs and supply routes. Meanwhile, Elias Voss, still hiding with his daughter in the AI Maro 17 inside a ruined science vessel drifting beyond Saturn, received the transmission in new time, was running out because the galaxy was moving and silence could no longer protect them. Zelia, exhausted but fierce, worked day and night to upgrade the ship's jump core, while Lyra began showing strange signs, her eyes glowing faintly when near electronics, her presence calming even the AI, whose systems ran smoother when she was in the room, as if the child's mind was speaking in a forgotten language no one could hear. Elias feared what that might mean, especially after what Zelia finally admitted. Lyra wasn't just unique. She might be a true thought singer, a being from Zalari legends, able to link entire fleets through emotion and thought, a power so great it had once ended wars without firing a single shot, but also a power feared by rulers because such a gift could not be controlled. It's only trusted, and trust was something King Zorath had never known. The weight of her words settled like ice in Elias's chest as he realized Lyra was not only a symbol, but a living weapon. Others chose to see her that way, and already whispers of her ability had reached both human and alien ears, with some seeing salvation and others seeing only threat. Mara 17 confirmed intercepted data, bounty hunters, mercenary guilds, and even rogue human ships were searching for Lyra, not just to kill her, but to sell her to the highest bidder. And one name kept appearing across those channels: the Shroud, an elite Solari enforcer who never failed a hunt and had reportedly been seen near the Terran driftline, closing in fast. With escape routes narrowing, Elias made a difficult choice and sent a coded request to Admiral Tanaka, asking for extraction and safe passage to Earth, not for himself, but for Lyra and Zelia, though he knew the risks of exposing their location. Tanaka responded personally, voice firm but quiet, telling him help was already on the way. A special ops unit led by Captain Thorne, a soldier known for loyalty and doing the impossible, but the mission would require one dangerous detour. Needed to cross the Andari Wastes, a dead zone filled with old battle debris and gravitational anomalies. A place most ships refused to enter, yet it was their only hope of slipping past the growing blockade. As they prepared to leave, Mara offered one last gift, her core memory note, containing advanced defense protocols and battle predictions. Data, powerful enough to change fleet outcomes, but dangerous in the wrong hands, and she entrusted it to Lyra, saying only she steadies chaos, before going offline to prevent being tracked. The ship jumped into the wastes, light bending around them as twisted remains of ancient warships drifted like bones in the dark, and strange signals echoed through the void, voices from lost ships replaying in ghostly loops, trying to confuse their path. Then came the attack not from pirates or Zelari, but from automated drones left behind decades ago, still carrying old war orders, and the ship shook under their sudden assault. Elias took the controls, while Zelia guarded Lyra and Captain Thorne's unit, arriving in a camouflaged stealth frigate, joined the fight, blasting a path through the debris until the drones were destroyed. Aboard the frigate, the reunion was brief, and Elias felt something shift in the air as he handed Lyra over to Thorne's medic, her presence silencing even the grizzled soldiers as she stared at them with eyes far older than her age. The captain saluted Celia and promised they'd reach Earth, but Elias remained behind, choosing to mislead the trackers by drawing them deeper into the wastes aboard the decoy ship. Celia begged him not to go, but he smiled and kissed her forehead, whispering, "You'll make sure she becomes more than a symbol make, her human," before vanishing into the stars. With the child now en route to Earth, Zelia grieved in silence, but knew her fight was not over. For the Zelari would not stop until they destroyed or controlled what they feared. And King Zorth had just revealed his next move, broadcasting a chilling message across both empires, declaring the construction of a new weapon. The Void Crown, an orbital device meant to sever all telepathic links, raise thought singers from existence, and end the possibility of future peace. The name struck fear even into rebel Solari hearts, for it represented not just control, but annihilation of identity. And many began to doubt their king's path, secretly joining resistance cells or fleeing to human space in search of safety. On Earth, leaders watched the footage of Lyra's arrival in silence, stunned by her effect on those around her. Even hardened soldiers began acting calmer, more cooperative, and a room once full of arguing commanders suddenly found themselves speaking with patience and unity after just minutes in her presence. Tests confirmed her brainwaves were unlike any seen in either species, a perfect balance of both, with energy patterns that harmonized rather than conflicted. And scientists realized she wasn't just an evolution, she was a bridge. Still others saw danger, and murmurs of containment began, whispers of using her to win the war before it grew worse. But Zelia stood firm, warning them that any attempt to force Lyra's hand would destroy what made her unique. The galaxy was now spinning toward a breaking point, with human fleets striking deep into Zelari space under Operation Homefire. Rebel groups forming on distant moons, and above it all, the void crown slowly rising in orbit above the Zelari homeworld, a shadow waiting to fall. And while Elias drifted through the Andari wastes, hunted and alone, he sent one last message on a dying channel, voice steady and clear. She is not your weapon. She is not your fear. She is hope. And if you fear that, maybe you were the problem all along. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in a hidden lab carved into the rock of an old mountain base, Lyra sat quietly on a padded bench, her small hands folded on her lap, her glowing eyes focused on a wall no one else could see, while scientists and generals stood behind thick glass, whispering about the strange energy signals rising off her body like a gentle pulse. The room was silent, but in the minds of those nearby, thoughts had begun to shift. Arguments cooled. Old hatreds faded, and even long-standing rivals among Earth's leadership found themselves agreeing without knowing why, as if an unseen voice was guiding them toward calm, toward unity, and they all knew it was her, the child born of human and Zelari blood. Now called the bridge in underground networks, her influence spreading quietly through those who met her, creating pockets of peace where there had only been conflict. Zelia stood watchfully at her daughter's side, weary but proud, refusing every offer to have Lyra studied further or moved to a stronger facility, because she knew the danger wasn't just outside with the warships and spies, but within, among those who feared what they could not control. And the moment they tried to use Lyra as a weapon, she would lose the part of herself that made her different. Meanwhile, across space, the Zelari Empire had begun cracking king. Soret's order to finish the Void Crown stirred panic among his people, especially after rebel leaders intercepted part of his speech in which he named Lyra the death of true Zelari blood and promised to erase all traces of her kind forever. Protests erupted on 3 Zelari colonies, their citizens demanding peace, some even chanting Lyra's name while waving blended flags of blue and violet, and though the king sent guards to silence them, he could not erase the message that had begun spreading snippets of Ilias's final words before he vanished into the Andari wastes, broadcast again and again by rogue AI across relay networks, reminding everyone that Lyra was not the threat, but the proof that something better was possible. Back on Earth, Lyra began to speak more clearly, her voice soft but strange, always saying things she could not know, details of star systems she'd never seen, names of ships still in deep space, even secret codes buried in ancient Zelari songs that caused the machines in the lab to hum in response. No one taught her these things, and yet they flowed from her like memories from another life, and the more she spoke, the more Earth's leaders began to understand this child was connected to something beyond biology, something ancient and deep, like an echo from a time before war, when the stars were quiet and minds could touch across space without fear. But not everyone believed she was a miracle. Some called her a threat in disguise, a ticking weapon waiting to explode. And soon, those voices grew louder, led by Commander Brant Kell, a war hero turned politician who claimed Lyra's presence weakened human defenses and would turn the tide in favor of the Zelari if she remained. On Earth, he demanded she be moved to a secure orbital cell, claiming it was for safety, but Zelia refused. And when guards tried to enter the room, they froze mid-step, confused and shaken, turning around without a word, unable to explain their change of mind. Lyra hadn't moved, but her voice had filled the air, low and rhythmic like a song no one remembered learning, and something in it turned anger into silence. Brant Kell stormed out, vowing to return with full authority. And Celia knew their time on Earth was coming to an end, because fear always grows louder before it dies. That night, a secret message came from the rebel Zalari group known as the Free Bond, led by a former royal guard named Thalavan, who once served under King Zorath, but left in shame after learning the king had ordered the murder of innocent border colonies. He now led defectors across 3 systems and begged for a meeting with Lyra, believing she could help stop the Void Crown from activating by reaching the minds of those still loyal to the king and awakening whatever sense of justice remained. It was a risk, but Zelia agreed, and with help from Captain Thorn, who returned from deep space after weeks of dodging bounty hunters, they slipped out of Earth's atmosphere aboard a stealth craft, heading for a small moon called Granus 12, where Thaler waited in the ruins of an old observatory. The journey was quiet, but Lyra never slept. She hummed softly, her hands tracing glowing shapes in the air. And when they landed, the Free Bond soldiers dropped their weapons, falling to their knees as Lyra passed, tears in their eyes without knowing why. Thaler bowed deeply, whispering in his whole tongue, "We have forgotten the old ways." But she remembers, and when Lyra reached out and touched his hand, visions rushed into his mind, images of peace, of cities where Zalari and humans walked side by side, of children playing under twin suns. And he wept openly, declaring that the war must end, no matter the cost. But even as hope grew in these broken corners of the galaxy, danger moved closer. The Shroud had found Ilias's decoy ship in the wastes, only to discover it was empty, a trap filled with false signals and radiation emitters. Furious, the hunter traced the last real signal to Earth's outer rim and began hunting again, now more determined than ever to find the child and bring her before King Zorath alive. For the king had changed his plan. He no longer wanted her dead, but bound and silenced, her gift harvested by machines, her mind torn apart so no one else could hear her voice. As Lyra stood atop the observatory tower, looking at the stars with her mother beside her, the wind whispered of coming battle. And far above them, the Void Crown began to activate, its systems powering up with a pulse strong enough to silence all mental signals in a wide zone, which would crush her gift before she could use it to reach the Zalari people. They had little time, and Thalor offered his fleet for a single chance and escort mission to the Zalari capital, where Lyra could speak directly to the minds of those still bound by the king's command, and perhaps awaken something long buried in them. The plan was dangerous, almost impossible, but Zelia agreed, knowing that if they waited, the Void Crown would erase her daughter's gift forever, and the galaxy would fall back into endless war. And as the fleet prepared for launch, Lyra closed her eyes and whispered, not in fear, but with calm certainty, "I hear them. ... They are listening." The stars above the Zalari capital dimmed as the Free Bond fleet emerged from hyperspace, silent and ready, with Lyra's ship at the center, surrounded by warships that bore no flag, only the mark of resistance, a silver flame across black holes that shimmered like shadows in the void. And as soon as they entered orbit, alarms rang out on the royal defense stations, and King Zorath, seated in his vast command chamber beneath the Void Crown, narrowed his eyes as he watched the screens flash red, unaware that this was not just another rebel push, but the beginning of a deeper strike, one meant to break the silence he had spent years building around his people's minds. Lyra stood inside the observation dome aboard the lead vessel, her gaze fixed on the planet below, her hands warm in Zelia's grip as Captain Thorn and Thalor prepared their final briefing, knowing that this mission was not a full invasion, but a piercing message meant to slip through before the Void Crown's field locked everything down. And while Zelia had wanted to protect her daughter at all costs, she knew now that hiding her would only delay the inevitable. And it was Lyra herself who had insisted on going, saying softly, "They must hear me before they cannot," with a voice that echoed through even the ship's systems. Below, the streets of the capital glowed with ordered light, but tension brewed behind the silence. for the citizens had heard whispers of the bridge child's arrival. And though the king's news feeds showed only lies, many could feel something had changed, as dreams of glowing eyes and twin voices filled their sleep. Dreams they did not understand, but could not ignore. And deep within the palace walls, the Shroud received his final order from the king not to kill Lyra, but to bring her to the Void Crown's core, where her mind would be severed from itself, using the new Mind Split Array. An ancient relic reactivated for this one purpose, and the Shroud, loyal but curious, wondered why such a child frightened the most powerful mind in the Empire. As the rebel fleet approached the outer defense ring, Kata but Thorn's team released a decoy, waved dozens of drones mimicking engine signals, and the turrets fired wildly into the dark, allowing the main ship to slip through unnoticed, diving fast into the lower orbital lane, where a hidden relay beacon waited to boost Lyra's telepathic signal across the Zalari capital, if they could reach it in time. And all around them, rebel ships clashed with royal forces in flashes of red and gold, engines screaming, holes splitting, but none of it mattered if Lyra's voice could not be heard. Inside the ship, Lyra began to shake, not from fear, but from the pressure building in her mind, as the Void Crown's energy field touched the edge of her gift, dulling the song she always felt inside. And Zelia knelt beside her, whispering the lullaby she used to sing in the hidden lab back on Earth, the one that always helped Lyra center herself. And for a moment, the glow in her eyes steadied. They reached the drop zone, a shattered ring station just outside the capital's main tower. Dalla and his team would escort Lyra on foot through the underground city tunnels to the relay point, while Thorn's soldiers held back the growing swarm of security forces closing in from every direction. The team landed amid wreckage and dust, plasma fire lighting the skies above as ships fell like burning stars. In the moment Lyra's boots touched the ground, the silence shifted. Zalari soldiers nearby paused, confused, some dropping their weapons without knowing why, as if something in their minds remembered a feeling they had forgotten long ago. A calm that didn't come from control, but from something real. As they moved through the tunnels, old broadcast wires sparked and flickered, and Lyra reached out to them, whispering strange codes in the old Zalari tongue, and the wires responded, activating small lights in hidden paths once thought lost, guiding them deeper into the city's veins. But the Shroud was already there, waiting near the relay tower with a strike team, cloaked and armed, and when Thal's team emerged from the tunnel into the dark square, plasma bolts rained down, catching one rebel soldier in the chest and sending him spinning to the ground. Chaos erupted, but Lyra stood still, lifting her hand slowly. The sound of battle bent around her as if wrapped in fog, her presence causing even the Shroud's elite to falter, lowering their weapons for a moment that felt endless. The Shroud stepped forward, removing his mask, revealing a face twisted with conflictive hatred, half wonder as he stared at the child and said, "You are not what I expected." But before he could act, Zelia stood between them, blade drawn, daring him to make a choice. Lyra, eyes bright, walked past them both and placed her hand on the relay's central core. And for a moment, nothing happened till the signal burst outward like a heartbeat, reaching every mind in the city in one sweep, not with words, but with feeling, a rush of shared memory, of loss, of hope, of children born in peace and not war, of laughter instead of orders. And across the city, civilians stopped, stared at the sky, and wept without knowing why. Even inside the throne chamber, King Zorth froze as his guards collapsed in confusion, overwhelmed by the sudden flood of foreign emotion. And for the first time, he felt fear not of power, but of being forgotten, of losing control without even a shot being fired. The Void Crown responded, its systems roaring to life, preparing to sever the network Lyra had just opened. But in that moment, Rebel hackers activated their final Cardmire's core memory, hidden inside Lyra's mind, which now uploaded itself into the Void Crown's circuits, locking it into a feedback loop of compassion and truth, turning its silencing field into a beacon of clarity. Above, the structure pulsed, its deadly hum replaced by a calm resonance that reached into the deepest parts of space, and for a heartbeat, to Tiga, the war stopped. No orders moved, no shots fired, just silence and peace. The Shroud stepped back, eyes wide, and lowered his blade, vanishing into the shadows without a word. And Thorn's voice came through the calm, broken but proud. The sky is listening. Lyra collapsed into Zelia's arms, drained but smiling, and across the stars, humans and Zellari alike felt the change, as if a song had ended and another had just begun. The stars over the Zellari capital pulsed with a strange stillness after the signal had gone out, and though the warships still circled above, though the weapons still hummed with deadly energy, no one moved, no one fired. Because something deep had shifted, not a change in law or command, but in feeling, as if a curtain had been pulled back and the truth had stood quietly behind it all along. Lyra lay in Zelia's arms, her skin warm, her glow dimmed, her mind quiet after pushing her gift further than ever before. And as Thorn's voice echoed through the come again, urging extraction, Valor looked to the sky and knew the fight was not over, but something far more dangerous than battle had begun. A change in belief, a breaking of the story people have been told their whole lives, that humans and Zellari must always be enemies, that blood could never mix, that peace was a lie. And now, standing beside a child who had spoken without words and been heard by an entire world, he felt both fear and hope as he had never felt them before. Above, the Void Crown glowed steadily. Key's energy field transformed from a weapon into something new, a network not of control, but connection, sending out waves that softened rage, unclouded thought. And in its control room, confused engineers stood, frozen, watching as their systems refused to obey violent commands and instead showed images of old dreams, places where stars were roads, not borders, where minds touched freely, and where war had no voice. King Zarath, deep in his throne chamber, roared at the silence around him, slamming his fists against cold metal, shouting for the Shroud, for anyone. But the guards outside no longer responded. They stood in quiet contemplation, remembering the faces of humans they had killed, now feeling the weight of it as if it had happened yesterday. The king ordered a purge of the capital, but the command echoed back unread, its power slipping through his fingers like sand, and for the first time, the man who had ruled through fear felt alone in a room full of silence. Lyra stirred, her eyes opening slowly, and though her voice was soft, the team around her leaned in, listening as she whispered that the change was not finished yet, that the stars had heard her. But they waited to see what humanity and the Zellari would do next. She stood on shaky legs, helped by her mother and Thaler, and walked to the highest point of the relay tower, looking out over the glowing city. It's now strangely quiet, its streets lit not by fire or blaster bolts, but by people standing together, staring up, as if waiting for something more. And when Lyra raised her hand, the air shimmered, and another wave of energy pulsed out, not a command, not even a message, but a reminder. A mirror held to every heart, tuned to it, reflecting pain, joy, hope, loss, and the possibility of change. Across the galaxy, ships paused, soldiers stood down, commanders canceled attacks without knowing why, and mothers on both sides of the war held their children tighter, feeling as if the stars themselves had breathed. Far away, on Earth, the United Assembly watched the reports come in, one after another's Lari colonies calling for peace talks, warlords dropping their claims, royal loyalists going silent hand. While some feared it was a trap, most felt What Lyra had planted began to take root, a quiet unity built not on treaties or surrender, but on shared memory, in the sense that the war had already ended, if only they would let it. But not all were ready to give in, and high in orbit, a last fleet of Zalari extremists, led by General Varux, prepared for a final strike, believing the king had gone weak, that Lyra was a plague to be erased, and as their warships aimed toward the capital, Lyra turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as if she could feel them even from the surface. She whispered something into the relay again, and though it was only a breath, it reached them like thunder in their minds, not words, but a feeling so strong they dropped their weapons mid-command, some laughing, some collapsing, as they remembered the lives they had lived before war consumed them. General Varus himself fell to his knees on the bridge of his warship, staring into the stars and seeing, not enemies, but the face of his daughter, lost years ago in a border raid, and for the first time, he wondered what kind of future she might have seen if she had lived long enough to witness this moment. The ships pulled back, slowly, one by one, and as the threat faded, the last defenders of the old war realized they had already lost, not in battle, but in belief. In the throne chamber, King Zorath stood alone, alarms silent, power faded, and when he finally walked to the great window and looked down on his city, he saw not rebellion, not chaos, but something he could never control, people thinking for themselves, standing together without fear, led not by force, but by the echo of a child's voice. He turned from the window, removed his crown, and left the chamber without a word, vanishing into history as the last king of an age now ending. Weeks later, peace talks began not in great halls or war rooms, but in open fields under the stars, where humans and Zalari sat in circles, sharing food and songs and stories of the old times, slowly learning to build a new story together. And at the center of it all stood Lyra, still small, still quiet, but her presence more powerful than any fleet. Her gaze enough to calm disputes before they began, and though she never asked for leadership, it grew around her like light around a sun. She walked between worlds now, not as a ruler, but as a symbol, the child who had changed the stars without firing a shot. And wherever she went, walls fell, silence broke, and people listened, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. Zelia remained by her side, ever watchful, proud, yet cautious, knowing that peace was not an end, but a beginning. And Captain Thorn helped train the next generation of peacekeeper soldiers, not with weapons, but with minds sharp, enough to defend truth and protect hope. They'll lead missions into deep space, finding lost colonies and spreading Lyra's message. And even the Shroud, once the most feared killer in the Empire, was seen again, no longer hunting, but healing, quietly guarding the shadows so others could live in the light. And so, as the galaxy turned and the stars watched silently as they always had, the old wars faded into stories, and a new chapter began, not written in blood, but in memory, in unity, and in the quiet power of a child who had shown two great races not just how to stop fighting, but how to dream again.